By sunrise, 6 cardboard boxes were waiting outside Aeri Coffee. They stood in a crooked line on the rain-darkened sidewalk beneath the brass sign, each one marked in black marker with the same name, Sienna Monroe. Sienna stopped in the doorway with one hand still on the glass. For a moment, she could not move. The city was waking around her. A delivery scooter passed through the intersection. A woman with a red umbrella hurried toward the subway. Somewhere down the street, a metal shutter rolled upward with a long, scraping sound. But Sienna only saw the boxes. 6 damp, ordinary cardboard boxes. And somehow, they felt heavier than anything she had carried across an ocean. Her father had sent them. That was what the message said. But Sienna knew Denise had packed them. Denise had chosen what stayed. Denise had chosen what went. Denise had decided that the room Sienna once slept in, the room where she had learned to make herself quiet, no longer belonged to her. For years, Sienna had believed that home was where people let you remain. Standing outside Aeri Coffee, she began to understand that home might be something else. It might be the place where you could finally stop begging to be allowed in. One box had torn open at the bottom. Old books had slid onto the pavement. A stack of childhood photographs lay half-spilled beneath a damp sweater. A small picture frame had tipped onto its side near the curb. Sienna knelt slowly. Her fingers hovered over a photograph before she picked it up. It was old. The edges had faded. In it, she was 8 years old, standing beside her mother at a park, both of them smiling into the sun. Her mother's arm was wrapped around her shoulders. Sienna looked safe in that picture. Not perfect, not guarded, safe. Her chest tightened. She had spent years believing that losing her room in that house meant losing proof that she had ever belonged. But the picture in her hand told a different story. She had belonged to herself before Denise ever entered her life. She had belonged to her mother's love. She had belonged to every dream she had protected in silence. No cardboard box could take that away. Behind her, the cafe door opened. Jun-so stepped out first. Then Tae-hyun. Then Min-jae. None of them asked what happened. None of them said, "Oh my God." None of them looked at the boxes as though they were evidence of Sienna's shame. They looked at them as though they were simply things that needed carrying. Jun-so picked up the first box. "Where do you want these?" he asked. Sienna swallowed. "Inside," she said. "Okay, that was all. No questions, no pressure." Min-jae gathered the wet books from the pavement, placing each one carefully on a clean towel near the cafe entrance. Tae-hyun lifted the broken box from beneath the photographs, moving slowly so nothing else would fall. Sienna watched them in silence. A part of her wanted to apologize. She wanted to tell them they did not have to help. She wanted to say it was embarrassing, that it was too much, that she should have handled it before anyone saw. But then she remembered something she had been learning. Receiving care was not the same thing as becoming a burden. Letting someone stand beside her did not mean she had failed to stand on her own. The cafe opened late that morning. Do-hyun taped a small handwritten sign to the front door that said they would open in 30 minutes. He did not explain. He did not make up an excuse. He simply gave Sienna time. And for the first time, she let herself take it. If you have ever been taught that accepting help means you are weak, stay with Sienna. Because sometimes healing begins when a woman stops carrying every painful thing alone. Subscribe to Women Who Win Over Abuse for stories about boundaries, healing, and the courage it takes to build a life that finally feels safe. The boxes remained in the cafe storage room for 2 days. Sienna could not bring herself to open them at first. She knew there would be old birthday cards inside, school papers, things her mother had kept, things Denise had decided were no longer worth holding on to. Then, after closing one quiet evening, she carried one small box to the corner table near the back window. The cafe was dark except for the warm lamps over the counter and the soft light above her table. Outside, Seoul moved past the glass in blurred streams of headlights. Inside, Sienna opened the box. At first, it was ordinary things. A stack of report cards. A childhood sweater. A folder of old school pictures. Then, beneath a bundle of yellowed letters, she found a spiral notebook with a blue cover. She knew it immediately. It was the notebook she had kept when she was 11. Before Denise became openly cruel. Before Sienna learned how to apologize before anyone asked. The first pages were full of childish drawings, houses, trees, little girls with round heads and bright smiles. Then the handwriting changed. It became smaller, tighter, more careful. She turned a page. At the top, in dark pencil, she had written, "Things to remember." Below it were 4 rules. Do not cry at dinner. Do not argue. Try to be easier. Do not make Dad sad. Sienna stared at the words until they blurred. She did not remember writing them, but she remembered needing them. She remembered Denise's silence when Sienna cried. The way her stepmother would look disappointed, as though Sienna had spoiled the room by having feelings. She remembered arguments that always ended the same way. Sienna would ask why something hurt. Denise would say she was disrespectful. Marcus would tell them both to calm down. And somehow, by the end of it, Sienna would be apologizing. She closed the notebook. Her hands were shaking, not from anger, not yet, from grief. Because the little girl who wrote those rules had believed she had to become smaller in order to be loved. She had believed that keeping everyone else comfortable was the price of belonging, and no one had told her that she was allowed to take up space. No one had told her that being hurt did not make her difficult. No one had told her that crying at dinner did not make her bad. Sienna pressed her fingers against the notebook cover. Then she whispered the words she had needed to hear years ago. You were not difficult. Her voice cracked. You were afraid. At her next counseling appointment, Sienna brought the notebook with her. She placed it on the table between herself and the counselor. For a while, neither of them spoke. The counselor turned the pages gently, not reading them like evidence, but receiving them like something fragile. Then she looked at Sienna. What do you see when you read those words now? Sienna stared at the notebook. I see a child trying not to make anyone angry. The counselor nodded. Anything else? Sienna was quiet. Then she said, I see someone who thought she had to earn kindness. The sentence sat in the room. It was one of those truths that did not arrive loudly. It just stood there, waiting to be seen. The counselor leaned forward slightly. Do you think she should have had to earn it? Sienna looked down. No. Why not? Because she was a child. And children deserve care, the counselor said. Not conditions. Sienna's eyes filled. For so long, she had been angry at herself for not standing up sooner, for not seeing Denise clearly enough, for not leaving earlier, for not becoming stronger faster. But strength was a complicated word when someone had spent years being taught that fear was normal. She had survived the only way she knew how, by becoming quiet, by reading rooms, by making herself useful, by learning the moods of everyone around her. The counselor spoke gently. Sometimes people call a child sensitive when what they really mean is that the child is responding honestly to pain. Sienna let that settle inside her, responding honestly to pain, not dramatic, not difficult, not too much, honest. When she left the counselor's office that day, Seoul looked different, not because the city had changed, because Sienna had. She was beginning to see her past without Denise's voice narrating it, and that was a kind of freedom. 2 days later, Do-yeon asked Sienna to step into the cafe office. The room was small, with a desk, a shelf of invoices, and a narrow window that looked onto the back alley. Sienna's stomach tightened before she sat down. Do-yeon did not look angry, but he looked serious. He turned his laptop toward her. On the screen was an email from Denise. The message was long, too long. It began politely. It described Denise as a concerned stepmother. It said Sienna was emotionally unstable. It implied she had run away from responsibilities in the United States. It suggested that Aeri Coffee might be taking advantage of a vulnerable foreign woman. It asked Do-yeon to meet privately so Denise could explain the full family situation. Sienna read it once, then again. Her heart began to race. There it was. The version of her Denise had always wanted other people to see. Fragile, unreliable, confused. The girl who could not be trusted with her own life, For one moment, the old fear returned. What if Du Yun believed her? What if the cafe staff started seeing her differently? What if everything she built in Seoul could be destroyed by someone else's story about who she was? Du Yun waited until she finished reading. Then he closed the laptop. I have not replied, he said. Sienna looked up. I will not discuss you with her without your permission. The room became quiet. Then he asked, What do you want done? Sienna stared at him. It was such a simple question, but it made her feel almost unsteady, because Denise had spent years speaking for her. Marcus had spent years asking her to be quiet. Jordan had spent years acting as though her needs were an inconvenience, and now here was Du Yun, placing the decision directly back into her hands. What do you want done? Sienna took a breath. I do not want you to answer her. Okay. I do not want you to meet with her. Okay. And if she comes here again, I want to speak for myself. Du Yun nodded. Okay. Sienna looked down at her hands. I might need you nearby. I will be nearby, he said. Not I will take over, not I will handle it. I will be nearby. And that was the difference between protection and control. One took your power from you. The other stood close enough for you to use it. Aeri Coffee's anniversary event was scheduled for that Saturday. It was a small celebration, nothing grand. A coffee tasting, pastries from a nearby bakery, a few local artists displaying work along the sidewall. The cafe had been open for 4 years. For Sienna, it had been open for 6 months. But those 6 months had changed her life. On the morning of the event, she stood near the front table, arranging welcome cards and small cream-colored flowers in glass jars. She wore a soft ivory blouse tucked into dark tailored trousers. Her curls rested around her shoulders. For the first time since arriving in Seoul, she looked at herself in the reflection of the front window and saw someone she recognized. Not because she had become fearless, because she had become present. Junso came by carrying a tray of pastries. You made the cards too pretty, he said. Sienna smiled. That is not possible. It is, he said. Now people will expect us to be sophisticated. Taehyun walked past with a box of tasting cups. You are not sophisticated, he told Junseo. Junseo put a hand over his heart. That is cruel. Sienna laughed. It surprised her a little. Not the sound itself, the ease of it. There had been a time when laughter felt dangerous around family, like it could be taken away if she was too happy. But here, in this cafe, happiness did not come with a warning. It could simply exist. By noon, the event was underway, the cafe filled with soft music and conversation. Customers moved from table to table, tasting different roasts. Someone near the window admired a set of small paintings. The staff moved easily through the space, welcoming people, refilling cups, telling stories about the beans and pastries. Sienna stood near the entry table, greeting guests. For a little while, she forgot to be afraid. Then the brass bell over the door chimed, and everything inside her went still. Denise entered first. She wore a pale taupe suit and the expression of a woman arriving somewhere she believed she deserved to be. Marcus came behind her, shoulders heavy. Jordan followed last, his face already tight with irritation. They looked out of place among the flowers, the warm lights, the guests holding small tasting cups. But Denise did not seem embarrassed. She looked almost pleased, like she had chosen the perfect stage. Sienna stood still. Her first instinct was to walk away. Her second was to call Du Yun. But then she remembered the office. What do you want done? She had said she wanted to speak for herself. So she did not run. Denise approached with a soft smile. Hello, Sienna. Hello, Denise. We came to make peace. The sentence sounded beautiful if you did not know Denise. It sounded like an olive branch, like forgiveness, like a mother trying to mend something broken. But Sienna knew what it meant. It meant Denise had come to make the story look better for herself. She had come because public reconciliation was easier than private accountability. Marcus stood beside her, silent. Jordan looked around the room as though waiting for someone to defend him. Denise stepped closer. I know things have been difficult, she said, but we are family. Then she reached for Sienna's hand. Sienna stepped back. It was only one step, but it changed the air between them. Denise's hand hung there for a second before she lowered it. "You will not even let me touch you now?" she asked. Sienna looked at her. "I said no." Denise's smile faded slightly. The people nearby had become quieter. Not gathering, not crowding, but aware. Sienna could see Do-Yun near the counter. Jun-So stood by the pastry case. Tae-Hyun had paused by the tasting table. Min-jae was near the door. None of them moved toward her. They were not there to rescue her from her own voice. They were there to make sure she had room to use it. Denise looked around the cafe. "This is what I have been dealing with," she said loud enough for others to hear. She twists everything. And for one instant, Sienna felt the old reflex rise. Apologize. Explain. Make everyone comfortable. But then she looked at Denise, really looked at her, and she saw a woman who had spent years calling control concern because it made the control easier to defend. "You called me selfish whenever I needed something," Sienna said. Denise's face changed. Only slightly, but enough. "Sienna, you told me I was too sensitive whenever I was hurt. Sienna, this is not the time. You criticized my work, my body, my friendships, my choices, and every dream I had that did not include you." The room was quiet now. Not because Sienna had raised her voice, because she had stopped lowering it. Denise's mouth tightened. "I was trying to guide you." "No," Sienna said. "You were trying to control me." Marcus moved slightly. "Sienna, maybe we should talk somewhere private." She turned to him. And this was the part that hurt in a different way. Denise had been cruel, but Marcus had watched. He had seen enough. He had heard enough. And every time he asked Sienna to let it go, he had chosen Denise's comfort over Sienna's safety. "You did not protect me," Sienna said. Marcus looked stunned. "I did not know it was this bad." "You knew enough," she said quietly. "You heard enough." His eyes filled. Sienna's own eyes burned, but she did not look away. "You watched me become smaller and called it peace." Marcus lowered his head. The words landed. Not because Sienna wanted to hurt him, because he needed to understand that silence was not neutral. Silence had consequences. Denise took a step forward. "You are humiliating us." Sienna almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so familiar. The person who caused the wound was now accusing the wounded person of being cruel for showing it. Denise's eyes narrowed. "You think because these people are standing around you that you've become someone else?" Sienna breathed in, then out. "No," she said. "I think because these people are standing around me, I finally remember who I was before I learned to be afraid." Denise lifted a hand. "That is enough." For years, Sienna would have stopped. That sentence had been a command. Enough. Stop crying. Stop explaining. Stop talking. Stop making people uncomfortable. Stop telling the truth. But not this time. "I am not finished," Sienna said. Her voice was calm. Not hard, not cruel, certain. Denise stared at her. Sienna continued, "You do not get to come into my workplace again. Sienna, you do not get to contact my boss, my coworkers, or my friends. This is ridiculous. You do not get to use my father's health, my childhood belongings, or family guilt to force me into conversations I do not want." Jordan scoffed. "You are acting like we are strangers." Sienna looked at him. "No," she said. "I am acting like people who hurt me do not get unlimited access to me because we share a last name." Jordan looked away first. Then Sienna turned back to Denise. "If you want a relationship with me, it will require truth, not performance, not guilt, not pretending that what happened was my fault." Denise's face went cold. "So you are cutting us off?" "I am setting boundaries." "You are punishing us." "No," Sienna said. "I'm protecting myself." The distinction mattered. She wanted Denise to hear it. She wanted herself to hear it. A boundary was not revenge. It was not cruelty. It was simply the truth about what someone had to do if they wanted access to her life. Sienna turned to her father. "If you want a relationship with me, you can contact me directly. You can speak to me with respect. You can take responsibility for the years you stayed silent." Marcus's face crumpled. I am sorry, he whispered. Sienna looked at him for a long moment. She wanted to accept it immediately. She wanted to make it easier. That old instinct still lived in her, but healing meant telling the truth before offering comfort. I believe you are sorry, she said, but sorry is not the same as changed. Marcus nodded slowly. Tears slipped down his face. I understand. Sienna shook her head gently. No, not yet. But you can learn. Then she looked at Denise and Jordan. You need to leave. Do-yoon stepped toward the door. He opened it. Not dramatically, not angrily, just clearly. Denise stood still for a moment. Her mouth tightened as though she had expected someone to intervene. Expected Sienna to panic. Expected Marcus to demand another chance. Expected the old version of Sienna to come running after her and apologize for the scene. But Sienna did not move. Denise walked out. Jordan followed. Marcus hesitated at the door. Then he looked back once. Sienna met his eyes, not with hatred, not with relief, with truth. Then he left too. The door closed behind them. The brass bell chimed once, and the cafe held its breath. For a second, Sienna stood in the middle of the room, feeling everything at once. Grief, relief, fear, sadness, pride. She had wanted a family that loved her well. She had wanted an apology that changed the past. She had wanted her father to stand up sooner. But wanting those things did not mean she had to keep accepting less. Do-yoon did not rush toward her. He waited. Then he asked softly, Are you okay? Sienna wiped one tear from her cheek. No, she said honestly. Then she looked around the cafe, at the warm lights, at the people who had not left, at the coworkers who stood quietly nearby. But I think I will be. Weeks passed. Denise did not contact the cafe again. Jordan sent one message and then deleted it before Sienna opened it. Marcus wrote a short email. It did not ask her to come home. It did not make excuses. It simply said he had started counseling and was trying to understand the harm his silence had caused. Sienna read it twice. Then she put it away. She did not reply immediately. She was learning that she did not have to answer every door the moment someone knocked. At Aeri Coffee, life continued. The boxes were slowly sorted. Some things she kept. The photograph of her mother, the blue notebook, a few letters, a small ceramic jewelry box. Other things she donated or let go. Not because the past did not matter, but because she was no longer willing to carry every piece of it. One afternoon, Do-yoon asked her to come into the cafe office. Sienna sat across from him at the small desk. He placed a folder in front of her. Inside was a new role offer, community manager and lead host for Aeri Coffee's events. The position included better pay, more responsibility, and a chance to build the kind of neighborhood programs Sienna had been dreaming about. Language exchange mornings, local artist nights, quiet support gatherings for international women finding their footing in Seoul. Sienna looked down at the paper. For a moment, all the old voices returned. Are you ready? What if you fail? What will people think? Should you ask first? But then another voice rose beneath them, her own. Do-yoon watched her carefully. What do you think? He asked. And for the first time, Sienna did not imagine Denise's answer. She did not imagine Jordan laughing. She did not imagine Marcus telling her to be practical. She looked at the offer. Then she looked up. I think I want it. Do-yoon smiled. Then it is yours. It was a small moment, a simple decision. But for Sienna, it felt like a door opening, not because someone else had given her a life, because she had finally chosen one. That evening, Sienna left Aeri Coffee carrying one small box in her arms. Inside were the things she had chosen. The photograph of her mother. The notebook she would keep not as a wound, but as proof of how far she had come. A few letters. One small framed picture of herself as a child. The streets of Seoul glowed around her. Rain from earlier in the day still shone on the pavement. Behind her, Aeri Coffee was warm through the windows, golden against the evening. Sienna paused for a moment outside the cafe. She looked back at the place where she had been seen, the place where people had learned her name without using it to control her, the place where she had discovered that being protected did not mean being powerless. And then she turned toward home. Not the house she had left, not the room someone had packed away. Home was not behind her anymore. It was in the choices she made now. It was in the boundaries she kept. It was in the quiet certainty that she did not have to shrink to be loved. For every woman who has been called difficult for telling the truth, selfish for choosing peace, or ungrateful for setting limits, you are not cruel for protecting the life you fought to build. You are not wrong for needing room to breathe. And you do not have to ask permission to become whole. Thank you for watching Women Who Win Over Abuse. If this story gave words to something you have lived through, subscribe and share only what feels safe, because healing is not always loud. Sometimes it begins the first time a woman says, "I am not finished."